today about that. What I define about me using Docker for fun. More on that later. So if you want to know what I do, that's a good description. If you know where this is from, I'll be impressed. That's taken from the book. Okay, so let's start with some warnings. This is not an intro to Docker talk. I'm going to be using a Docker here as a placeholder to say like just a kind of container environment to do container things. Probably could have done with LXC. I've never learned LXC, so I'm going to be lazy. I'm not going to learn today. I don't know if you can read. Can you read the gray words? Okay. Well, then the last warning is not that important. So let's talk about Docker. I don't understand that something as a service thing. It's just like Docker. You probably know what Docker, what they call Docker thing.
It's just containers.
Yeah, but the opposite, something as a service. Okay, but there's also like infrastructure as a service, toilet seats as a service. You know, I don't know as a service. I don't know. But let's talk about the way I see it. Docker, the bottom line is like instead of you build the entire computer, you're going to just build what you're trying to run inside it. Why people like to use Docker? Resiliency. You can make it so like if you're running something, it dies, it comes back here. If you need to update it, you update it, it works great. Moves here. Doesn't work great, go back to the beginning. Speed, it's fast, just pull it up. And it's running usually like some Linux file distribution. I don't know if you can run you probably can run Windows inside Docker.
Yeah, but I think you need a Windows host.
Yes. So also I call to me like you know the file system is like a stack of cards. The checkmate part, if you know from the TV show that's fine, you also impress me. I'll even give you a cat sticker. But the idea, what I say, stack of cards, like you build something, you start with something here, you add it, you put something on the top, you put something on the top, and if you want to change something, anything that's above it has to go, but anything that's below, you don't have to change. So, yes, you can probably run it on Windows, but yes. Okay. Let's talk about what I see as I affectionately call the Docker command. Thou shalt not only run one application container grouping a bunch of containers to do a full service, which translates, let's say you have a mail server. You're going to run one container for a postfix, one for Dovecot, one to put a storage where you're going to put your mail, one to do some database things, one to run your spam assassin, and maybe one for VLC. Okay, other ones. You're going to build, you remember how I talked about the file system, the stacks. So you're going to build every time you add another layer is a new image. So if you want to do it, you're going to build, install the programs you need on those intermediate images, and then once you're ready, you throw the configuration there and you start running it. You're not going to store the data or your configuration on the container. So instead of that, I probably should do it this way. It's the same thing. Instead of that, you know, you're going to feed it at runtime. You can, when you start the Docker container, you can say like, look for the configuration here, or you can pass the parameters, say like name of the machine, which IP I'm going to use, and stuff like that from the startup, and even some passwords. And you're not going to reconfigure the container while it's running. The idea of the Docker is if you want to change, you create a new container and blow up the old container. Am I still good?
Yeah, you're good. I'll just add to that, like if you were running a static site using like Apache, you wouldn't bake the static pages into the image. You'd serve those via like a data volume that you could, your Apache application is independent of the data you serve.
Yes, that's item number 3. Don't put your data on the container. I know people who created a Docker container that was like, you know, bigger than my car. It's like, stop doing that. And then there is me. That's where things get bad. Why I use Docker? Because sometimes I need to test something quick. You know, I try to do, you know, maybe I try to compile something, or maybe I received something that's suspicious I want to test.
Mauricio, one thing when you mentioned don't store your data in the container, an important reason not to do that is because it's not persistent storage. If the container dies, you just lost all your data.
Well, you still have the previous image, but you know you don't have what changed since then.
Yeah.
So everything that happens after that is gone. Which is why it's like, you know, for instance, a mail server. You know, if you have everything on the container, you start up, yeah, this mail, it dies, the mail is gone. You can only get to the mail that was on the image. So the best thing is like, just leave it outside. So anyway, so a lot of times what I create for to test my ideas is like I create a little container, and it's a container that has just a basic OS, whatever, and then I tell it to run SSH. So I can SSH into it, and that's my Docker file. And then I run it. And then a lot of times I'm using that to test my Ansible code. So that's why I want the SSH, because Ansible needs SSH and Python. But let's not talk about that. To run and do things. So in fact, you see, I actually have a Docker container that has my entire test mail server. Everything I said to put in separate things, I put everything together. If it works, that's good enough. Even when it doesn't work. And you can fix. And then try again. And then if you don't like it, you can change, say, okay, now let's run it from CentOS, CentOS 7, Fedora, or something else. So this is my quintessential container for a basic layout to you build something. As you saw, what this is probably supposed to be is a CentOS test environment. I have a Docker file, which we're going to show it, and a folder called files. Inside it is my public key. And how are we going to feed that? This is the Docker file. And I don't know how much of you know about, I can go quick and say what it's doing. First, you see the first line there, just saying, as you remember, it said test CentOS. So I'm going to grab CentOS, the latest version of CentOS. If you don't want it, you can put CentOS and specify which version you want. And then, yes.
Would it be at all possible to brighten up that screen so that we could actually, so the rest of us could read it?
Maybe we can make it kind of darker. How do you make this darker?
Turn the lights on.
Huh?
You turn the lights off.
Yes. Yeah. Which is the button to turn the lights off?
Switch. Well, try the switches anyway.
Do not turn off fluorescent lights. Ooh.
There you go.
Yeah.
Hey, you got it.
Witchcraft. Let's see what this is. Just do. Too much?
Yeah.
Too much.
Oh well. Open your eyes. Okay. So you remember what we talked about? We're installing first line there. Remember, installing the operating system. Second line there, that run. I'm telling it, okay, now put the latest version, update the OS, and then install OpenSSH. After that, as it says, configure SSHD. So I'm going to configure it so I cannot log in as root with a password, but I can log in with a key, and then create some keys here. So for the server, so the server can. So you can SSH to it using a key that fits like RSA, DSA, or whatever, and then the server will pay attention to you. In real life, you probably want to get rid of the DSA one. And then it's going to create the root on the top of the green line, the SSH directory for the root, and it's going to copy. You remember that file that we had test Docker pub? Going to copy from the machine you are to the authorized keys file on the container, make it so only root can read. This line expose 22 means that the container will let other people reach it on port 22, or at least we'll pay attention to that, because that is a bit more than that. We are going to see in the next slide, I think. And then you're going to start the SSH service here. Now, the interesting thing you might want to see, remember when we talked about the stack, the sandwich thing? Each statement you see run, it's a new image that's created, a new intermediate image. So that's why you see the ampersand, the two ampersands there. You're saying you're going to run yum update, and then you're going to install that. And that's one command, one step, one image created. And then all those SCDs and SSH keygens, they have been done together. Which means that if one of those crashes, you have to run that entire step again and recreate that image again. And then you create this thing, copy files, run, and off we go. Now we're going to build the image. What about that? Docker build. The -t there is the name of the image, the final image, how I want to call it. And then when you run it, you're going to see the D, you're going to run in demo, the upper key, I don't know what it is.
I don't know if that's
The lower P is like we are converting the port 22 in the container to the port 2009, because the Docker server also has its own port 22. So if you try to SSH which is port 22, you're going to be very disappointed. So you want to SSH into port 2009 to get to my container. The --rm means that if you kill it, you know, you can rebuild it without the complaint that you still have an old image. The -h is what it thinks it's its host name. The name is the name of the container as it's running and the image. So, but that's great. So I'm going to make my Ansible code run inside Docker and the production server. What I mean by that is, remember that we're using Docker as a test lab. Once you're satisfied to it, I want you to run on the real machine. If I want to run on the real machine, and I have to make my Ansible code or playbook, whatever, or task, whatever you want to call it, right? If you want to run, it has to be completely different than the one to run the Docker container. What's the point? You know, I want to make the thing that, you know, I write it, I say, okay, the structure works, and I can immediately apply to the real thing. So let's talk quick things about Ansible. The general layout I use is like, you know, I have a folder, you know, usually called Ansible. I have the little file that defines my local configuration. Host bars is a directory where I have the different machines that use Ansible playbook thing is supposed to talk to. Some global variables inside group var. Host is the name of all the machines that this Ansible code is going to know. Performance there, .yml is my playbook. That's going to describe, it's going to tell me what steps I want to do, and which are called roles, which are defined inside the roles directory. Case in point, you have the virtual roles, which in my case it creates, allows you to install KVM and Docker. I know it started becoming like Inception, but this is I actually stole this directory thing from this guy, not from the other guy. But the layout, it's always the same. Files, some files you want to upload. Yes, templates are files that you're going to configure on the fly before you will upload it to your machine. Meta, I never use. Vars, some variables that you define here that Ansible is going to use to build things. Handlers are ways to define, like if you have to start a process or do things like that, you hand them to handlers. And tasks is actually, describe what's the work you're going to do. So Let's talk about the handler, because that's what is kind of different between running a normal running Docker against a normal computer or a virtual machine versus running a container. Let's say you have fail2ban. If you use fail2ban, it's a program that usually the basic things like if you have a machine, you have SSH certs, people keep trying to hammer into it. You can tell it, okay, you try too much, goodbye. You have a timeout for like 8 hours or a week. That's what fail2ban does. You fail, you get banned. Now, this handler tells it, on your tasks file, you can say, okay, reconfigure fail2ban. It needs to take effect. So you're going to tell it, restart fail2ban. And then this guy is going to say, oh, my name is restart space fail2ban. I was called. What should I do? I want my state to be restarted, so I'm going to restart. That doesn't work well on Docker. So one thing you can do, you can tell it, if you're not running Docker, don't do this. That's a variable I created, and you don't have. We are going to talk about that. How I create that variable. There is Ansible environmental variables associated with the machine you're probulating. And one of those is Ansible virtualization type, which can be Docker, can be KVM, and some other things. I did here, I was creating virtualization type, which I probably wouldn't need for this specific case, but it does more stuff than just that on my real code. But here, all it does, if you're using a Docker container, tell me it's a Docker container. Otherwise, don't bother me. Now, how you find those variables that you can use? If you run Ansible, name of the machine you created that it knows about, and say -m setup, it's going to spit a list of everything it knows about that machine. And then you can use grep to grab something. Like for instance, I grab Docker, or I could grab CentOS. This time I grab Ansible distribution. And you can see there's a lot of strings that match that. And you figure out, oh, so if I want, I can suck the Ansible distribution by itself, and it's going to tell me it's a CentOS machine, which means also, you said there's other ways I can get, I'll say Red Hat, because you see there are things that CentOS does like Red Hat, and there are things that it does differently. Since you know that this guy is CentOS, and you can find out that it's actually also Red Hat, you can have stuff that are configured somewhere based on that. Even those that are running 7.7. You see distribution version. That's that guy, CentOS. Okay. Now, here's a way to apply that. You see, I said, well, I'm not going to use my variable because I'm going to use the one that you already created. So I can stop, in this case I'm running MySQL. I can stop MySQL using the command line that you manually kill MySQL if I'm running Docker. I could also have another line saying that now, if you're not running Docker, you're going to use the same thing we used before, and just the normal Docker way of doing things. Not Docker way of doing things, the normal Ansible way of doing things. And for me to start, I can start MySQL, div, save, and move on. And if you don't like it, you can change it. It doesn't care. Now, if this is complicated, I usually on handlers, there's a file called main. That's the first one inside that folder that Ansible is going to see. And then main can decide, okay, you can call all other little files, including them. So I can say here that If I'm not running Docker, I should use this guy. I should use that thing that has all those handlers to start and stop things in a normal way. If I'm running Docker, I'm going to use something like that to start and stop the database in a more abnormal way. Which one to use? Depends how many you have to do at the same time. You know, let's go number one, or number two. And once you're done, you can just say Docker kill test mail, it's gone. And if you have to start, you just go back again to the beginning and start again. Now, if you want to, if you're satisfied with that and say, well, what would happen if I'm going to test that mail server in Ubuntu? You remember those environmental variables? You can suck them out and then start making decisions based on those environmental variables. You know, if you're running CentOS, do this. Now, in addition to running CentOS, if you're also running Ubuntu, you do that. And then all you have to do is go back to your Docker file, and that first line, instead of saying CentOS, you can say Ubuntu, and then it builds the entire thing. Well, you have to change it also to, because Yum doesn't work on Ubuntu, but you can do some, you can play around with that. You can make it run, build a Ubuntu image, and your container is going to become an Ubuntu image, but then your Ansible, by reading the environmental variables for that specific container, it can make a decision about how to run it and install it the proper way and things like that. So, some interesting gotchas.
Question.
Yes.
Aren't you violating some of your initial rules that you started out with Docker?
And very proud of it.
Okay, because I mean, some of us envision or have worked with Ansible and use it for provisioning systems, usually bare metal.
Yes.
Seems like you're provisioning a Docker container, which seems completely averse to what Docker is intended to do.
Yes, which is why this presentation is called misusing
Oh,
Docker.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
So you started out.
It's
Tell
like,
us
you
what
know,
the rules
it's
were,
kind of
and
like, you
now
know,
you're
here I'm
violating.
here holding Docker, how pretty, and destroying them.
Okay.
That's it.
But
Okay,
you can obviously do it because you have. Right?
yes,
But you're doing it to test your Ansible.
yes. So I can use it in a production thing, in a proper system, and have it work. Because you see, in the case, like, you know, as I was talking about here, you test your Ansible code on CentOS. What if it's running on Red Hat properly? How are you going to make it? You can try it. What if you're going to, you find out it has to run on Ubuntu, Fedora, or something else? You can test all that before you actually build the machine.
So instead of building 5 or 6 bare metal servers,
You have a bunch of little containers that,
you just play it against the container.
yes.
So what happens to Docker's layered file system? And I mean, initially immutable, but you've obviously mutated it. So
Well, there's two parts. One is, you know, depends what you're doing. Like, you know, you might just be changing a parameter somewhere that, you know, for instance, like, you know, let's say you're, actually, it's worse than that, which goes down to part number 2, which is the immutable thing of Docker. I don't care, because I'm going to, you know, blow it up later.
yeah, exactly. But what layer is it going to? Does it always write to the topmost layer, and can you change layers? Can you write a new layer?
Well, you remember that the layers I'm going to do is just enough to install the operating system, do an update, and then get SSH to work. Everything else, for all as far as Ansible is concerned, it's a normal server that I can SSH and has Python on it, and I'm going to do things to it. So you remember that, you know, I don't care about Docker's feelings. I care about Ansible's feelings. I want to make Ansible happy. Ansible happy, Means I can get more servers happy.
But one of the other things that I thought I knew about Ansible was that it can safely reboot itself.
Yes.
How does the container reboot itself if it's going to lose all of the changes in its mutation?
Depends how you build the container. If you build, there's two ways you can see. If you build a container just as a test case to test your Ansible script, you don't care that much. If you want to have it running, you can still attach the container a storage entity of some sort, and then you put your data in that storage. So if it boots up and comes back up, your data is still there. And the container did not lose things because the container starts, gets the image, it gets the application on the top of the, on the top of the, the application is installed. Correction. It gets everything that's installed on the initial container, but anytime you reboot it, yes, those programs installed using Ansible, they are going to be lost. But for a testing environment, that might be okay. If that's not okay, then you go back to your Docker file and add those steps.
But so Ansible assumes item potency.
Yes.
So it trusts that the safe things that it's already done remain done and it doesn't have to do them again.
But if they're not done, it's going to do it again.
It keeps testing all the time.
Okay.
As I said, the idea is for users to test the from scratch. But
You do test stuff. It's going to switch off the project.
Come on. Are you back?
Yes.
Okay, so also remember the part also you're going to do is how far you want your container to have versus what you're going to add on the top of it using Ansible. And as this test lab, the entire idea is if you want to reboot it, you're going to lose things, but you accept that. But there's a lot of other things Ansible can do that you don't have to reboot. You can install services, start them, stop them without rebooting the machine. We good? Or good enough? So a few line. Yes. Okay, some things about running stuff inside Docker. Remember, we have to do the port redirection because some of those ports might be used for either the server running Docker, which could be Kubernetes or whatever, or some other container might use those ports. So you have to do your redirection. Second, containers use memory. How much memory you allocate for that? You might find out you're going to run out of it. Third, you have to decide if you're going to use CPUs and maybe some even physical device you can allocate, because from Docker, you can allocate some physical devices to it. You can give it a physical CPU, you can give a physical network card, physical storage, or any other way you want to do it. And even though you can say like, oh, Docker containers use less resource than a full gas bare metal. Yes. My first Docker container, my Docker server used for that was a VM, and it has 2 gigs of RAM, and I ran a lot of containers on it. My test and worked fine for what I was trying to do. In fact, the classic example I use it for, like when you do Python, you can create a Python env and do a bunch of things. I was like, why am I going to do that if I can just create 10 different containers and then run different crazy Python setups and see what happens? Which one I like more? But remember that physical devices, they still use whatever resource they use to do their thing. And that, goes back to the physical machine you're running this stuff from. And also, if there's more than one container there, eventually it's going to get to a point that they might start fighting for resources or going to make the machine down. But which is why you need to limit it how much resource they can use. So, okay. In conclusion, you learned nothing useful here. I had no demos to impress you, as you saw. I was lazy. I had to stop and keep looking clueless, come up with lies here. And the last one is kind of, whatever. Docker can be used to do things on Ansible. So it can use to test things and think about stuff. And not only on Ansible, but other things you are trying to test. It's a great, in my opinion, it's a great test lab. And before you commit something more serious. And in fact, I call that, Docker can be used to do things for Ansible. Which and the way you should see is like, you're trying to do stuff with Ansible. How can you use Docker to achieve what you're trying to accomplish? And yes, that green light's annoying as hell. That's why I left it there. Okay. Questions, exciting things? Told you it was going to be a short talk.
So I'll add to that. So I don't think you're arguing that running Ansible against container is better than a VM, but rather that it is faster. So if you need to test a lot of things, you need to iterate quickly.
Yes.
It's infinitely faster to spin up 10 containers since you already have the data on your host than spinning up 10 VMs using, at best, Terraform and having to wait for network to initialize, all these pieces to initialize. There are a lot of limitations to using Docker. Like systemd is not in containers or shouldn't be. Systemd,
which is why you have to do that thing you detect, like, oh, if I'm running on that, I cannot do systemd things. And then you have to have a thing to go around that.
Well, there's systemd, not Docker. Systemd runs in LXD.
I think also there's a way to run system. There's a way to run systemd in Docker. Also, there's a way to run systemd in Docker, but then you start to have to expose more stuff.
Yeah.
Which becomes more a security issue and things like that. And I say, and it's kind of, it's easier just to make your Ansible code to realize, I have systemd, I can do this. I don't have systemd, I can do that. Problem solved. Which is the same analogy that we did that you could even say like, okay, I don't have systemd. This might be a OpenBSD. And then I can do something else. It doesn't care. Just like, if it knows what it is, it can, if you tell it what it is and what it should do, it can do it. Let Ansible do what's designed to do. Yes?
Have you ever heard of Molecule?
Nope.
It's it's basically you would install Molecule 1 with Ansible, and you basically call Molecule to create a new role, and then to test that role. So it'll basically Molecule will set up a Docker container for you, or a Vagrant, or AWS, or whatever else. And then you can run a testing framework against that.
That's going to be interesting. I have to check.
There was an interesting fact for you, about 5 years ago. The guy that embedded Ansible lives here in Raleigh. And working at Cisco for a very short period of time. Didn't like having bosses. But, a lot of people aren't aware of that. They use it. I don't know if he still does that talk.
Tell them to give a talk here.
Did you look at if you were running a kubernetes, spinning up a VM for those instances where you needed to retain stuff instead of just rebuilding it from? So you would do your testing on a Docker container, or most of it, but then you could do like a final quality test against a VM because it's running at the same.
I haven't run a VM inside Kubernetes. The only time I've used Kubernetes was mostly to run container and container-like
I've seen
things.
presentations, but I haven't done it myself. I was
Okay.
just curious if you had looked at that.
But that's where at work we use OpenStack, which then becomes all bets are off. It's like, you want to run a bare metal? Run bare metal. You want to run KVM? Run KVM. You want to run a Docker? Docker, LXC, whatever. Don't care. Don't bother us. Just tell us. And we will go to the right machine. So my case, I just want to make something that, okay, I can build my little thing, run off my laptop, done. The production doesn't matter.
I think the major project that's trying to run VMs on Kubernetes is called KubeVirt.
Yeah,
yes,
I've just
KubeVirt,
seen
yes.
some presentations on it and, webinars, so I was just curious.
Which is kind of amusing because it feels like Kubernetes is supposed to do one thing, now they're trying to go to do what Kubernetes is supposed to be different from and bring it to Kubernetes.
Yeah.
It just smells like they're trying to make Kubernetes become OpenStack.
I can see where you're coming from. But I guess people are kind of trying to think of Kubernetes just as a control plane, and then you can run whatever you want, however you want it.
Which
You know,
is,
that.
yes.
So, I don't know.
It's like a duck by any other name, still quacks. So, any other exciting questions? No minute use were harmed in the creation of this presentation.
Well, I don't use Docker much. But what's the impact for those that you do? I'm curious, I haven't been following the acquisition. What's it going to mean for Docker in the future? Docker was bought.
Part of it.
Well, yeah.
I think about the cloud, right? The Docker cloud, whatever you call it.
There was a lot of discussion initially. A lot of people freaked out about it, but they didn't know what.
I would say there's a bigger impact by Red Hat going another way than Docker than there was with Docker being bought out, or part of Docker being bought out.
I think it was the Swarm thing that got bought out. So Kubernetes is kind of one in that market space. So enterprise Docker, which is really developing Docker Swarm, is like the piece.
Who bought it?
It is a company that I've never heard of. It's developing on one cloud.
Yeah, I was wondering if they were buying it for developers.
I think that's exactly
They care what else they got.
that's.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that have used Swarm over Gates for lots of reasons, and they'd like to stick to it. So, considering that that's bought out, did it change all the open source standings? For the, yeah, that's an interesting. I mean, like Facebook is like Gorilla has done some of those things with licenses, and then the community comes and turns around and reacts, and then they go, oh, all right, well, we won't do that. But Docker Swarm might be small enough that they didn't, not enough people reacted. They just quietly did something to us all.
Yes, like in my case, Docker died tomorrow, ceased to exist completely. I just changed my Ansible a bit, use something else, move on. Doesn't care.
You have to be agile if you're using open source. And I don't mean agile in terms of DevOps.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's all, folks. Thank you. And remember, those two might stay a bit longer if you want to harass them.